Join me every month for the inspiration to find your finish line. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Find Your Finish Line. Happy New Year. Can you believe we're in January of 2022? This podcast is a podcast that's sponsored again by Curad Performance, the official medical supplier of IRONMAN, and Active Ice, the official topical pain relief partner of IRONMAN. Thank you very much to Curad and Active Ice for your continued support throughout this entire 2021 and moving forward to 2022. We appreciate it greatly. This is a recap show of 2021. I'm going to talk about the podcasts we had on and go through every one of them and give you a little bit of a tidbit what I think we learned from it, because this podcast was designed to learn, to grow, to keep moving forward in a positive direction. Hopefully that has done that for you and helped inspire you to keep moving forward in that positive direction. I'm Mike Riley, everybody. Thank you for your support all year long. I hope you had a great holiday. You know, I saw a fantastic little comic the other day. It was two boys walking down the street with one another. One was older than the other. The younger one asked the older one, "Do you still believe in Santa Claus?" And the older one said, "Yes, I'm going to believe in Santa Claus always for the rest of my life." And the younger one said, "Oh, great." And the older one said, "Yeah, because if you stop believing in Santa Claus, all you're going to get for Christmas are clothes." So hopefully you just didn't get clothes for Christmas and you still believe. So it was a great holiday season. I hope you got to spend it with family and friends and be together with everybody, your loved ones. It's a time to rejuvenate. It's also a stressful time of year, and one of my podcasts addresses that, and I'll talk about that a little later. So it's a time that we have to reflect on where we've been and think about where we're going. Now that it's 2022, that's exactly what we're going to do. Think about where we're going. And I want each and every one of you to make sure that you sit down and you do that. First do it internally, then sit down with your family. What are we going to do this year? What are our goals? What do we want to attain? And, how do we want to grow? So with that, I'm going to start off talking about the podcast that we had. We had 20 of them for 2021. 20 podcasts, that each one was a variation of whether it was a professional athlete, an age grouper, someone from outside our sport that had a great story. And I try to always mix it in with so many different people from so many different walks of life so we can learn from each and every one of them. My first podcast for 2021 was Taren Gesell, Triathlon Taren. I had Taren on as my first guest because he had me on as his first podcast guest when he started it a few years back. So I felt it was to do a favor and have him on. I've always respected everything he's done. I mean, here's a guy that started out to self-improve. He knew he was overweight. He wasn't living well. He was eating incorrectly. And he decided to get into triathlon to self-improve. Then what he did was he started putting videos out there of the things he was doing. And I believed in a very innocent way, and I still do. Taren probably has received some criticism over the years that I don't think was deserved, because I think he was always, and he is always, speaking from the heart. He's got a large following, and it was a fantastic podcast that we had on. So if you get a chance, go back to listen to that one, and thank you, Taren, for being my first guest. My second guest of the year was Mirinda Carfrae, 7 times on the podium in Kona, 3-time Ironman world champion, 1-time 70.3 world champion from Australia. And Rinny is such a joy to be around. She's always got this positive, infectious attitude. Her husband, Tim O'Donnell, and you can see their posts all the time, and their 2 children live a fantastic life. Well, after her second child, Rinny has made that decision to come back. And it's great following her and seeing some of the things that she's doing to get back into the swing of it all at a high competitive level. And she raced a few 70.3s at the end of the season. And as always, Rinny was in the mix. So thank you, Rennie, for being on the podcast. You are a joy to be around. And everybody, I think the message you can get from Rennie is, man, she just keeps that positive attitude every day of the year, even though she's juggling so many things as a top professional triathlete, as a mom, as a wife, partner, as someone who mentors others. So Rennie, thanks for doing that. My third podcast was Derek Fitzgerald. Derek Fitzgerald is an incredible story. He contracted cancer, went through chemo and radiation, and the radiation was successful, but it killed his heart. So for a long period of time, he was a recipient, on the recipient list to be a heart transplant. And he did. He received his new heart. What he went through with the cancer alone, and then went through with almost dying before that new heart came in, and then recovering, and then getting to the Ironman start line and finishing the Ironman as the first ever cancer heart recipient person in the world to finish an Ironman. Derek Fitzgerald lives by the motto that every day is a bonus. We should live like that. Every day is a bonus. We only think about that sometimes when a tragedy strikes, like in Daryl's situation or anybody else's. We know it's a bonus because maybe something bad happened, or you get older and you're going, every day's a bonus because I don't know how many I have left. But you need to think like that whether you're a teenager in your 20s, 30s, 40s, no matter what happens. So living every day like he's in a bonus round. That's what Derek says. Thanks, Derek, for being on the show. Kris Gethin, strongman, muscle man, weightlifter, nutritionist. When you see the picture we have on my website of Kris, or you look up Kris Gethin, he is just one muscle-bound dude. Well, when I found out he was doing Ironman Coeur d'Alene years back, and I saw a picture of him, the size of his legs were like the size of my torso. And I'm going, gosh, I don't know if this guy can do this. But what Kris set out to do, he wanted to prove to that weightlifting world, the world that's always in the gym, he wanted to prove he could become an endurance athlete. He changed his training regimen. He started putting a lot of repetitions in. He didn't lose his core strength. He kept his nutrition level high, the protein. He figured it out on his own. And when he came to that start line in Coeur d'Alene and I saw him go into that water, he swam with some great flexibility in those arms. I mean, it was amazing. And he came across that finish line as a strong man. He wrote a book called A Man of Iron that you have to read and pick up because it explains how you can get from that world of the weightlifting and the muscle to that endurance world. He's combined both, and he still loves going out for runs and bike rides. So Kris Gethin, you are an inspiration, buddy. Thank you very much. My fifth podcast of the year was like rocket fuel going off with every word that came out of Lionel Sanders' mouth. He is one of the most open, honest, genuine characters I have ever met. And being on top of his game as one of our top professional triathletes in the world, we all know that he goes out there and gives everything, almost to a point of death, for goodness sakes. He pushes and he believes and he always talks about that he has no limits. There's no limits with his racing and his life and how he performs. Lionel is one that wears his heart on his sleeve. He's never one to make an excuse. He always praises his competitors. I mean, when he had the one-on-one race against Jan Frodeno, he had nothing but praise for Jan, even though he got beat. He has nothing for praise Sam Long in the 70.3 race back in May in St. George when Sam took him to the limit. Lionel is a true soul. And that podcast was one I'll never forget. I hope you get to see that one. The sixth one was Sika Henry. Sika Henry is a very inspirational story. She's the first African-American female to gain her professional triathlon card. And it took a while with COVID setting in and knocking races out of the mix. She had plans for this one and that one, and it just didn't happen. She's got an amazing support group. Her father is with her all the way. Her mother is with her all the way. And Sika did gain her pro card, in 2020. Congratulations to you for that, Sika. She's an excellent runner. I think we're going to see a lot of her in the future. And the best part about what she does is she goes into elementary schools, no matter where she's at, talking about her story, talking to young boys and girls on how you can achieve things in life that maybe your parents even told you that you can't. So Sika is one that is an inspiration, not only in our sport, but in life. Thank you, Sika. Gotta take a little drink. It's like I'm announcing a race here. I don't think, just talking at an expo and stuff like that, to me, it's harder on my voice than getting on the microphone and screaming at y'all. My seventh guest, Craig Alexander, Crowie. I wanted Crowie on the podcast because ever since his first win in Kona, and I have the story of it in my book. We went to the after party, and Craig was there with Neri, his wife. Everybody was partying and going crazy and having a great time. And I looked over at the end of the bar, which was kind of empty, and there was Craig and Neri just standing there by themselves. Newly crowned world champion. I found it a little odd. So I went over there and felt a little sheepish and shy about doing that because I thought they were having a private conversation, but I just wanted to see, hey, you okay? Everything good? And they said, yeah, Mike, we're just reminiscing about, my gosh, what's going on right now. We can't believe that we're in this position. And it was always we in Craig's word, him and Neri. And I found that so endearing. I found it to be something that I took away of his humbleness was amazing. And then he went on to win a couple more, set a course record that took a long time to get beat. Craig Alexander is a fantastic interview, but it's just like talking to my brother. It's like talking to someone you've known since childhood. And other pro triathletes look up to Craig Alexander as the one that's on top of the pedestal of how to live your life. Thank you, Crowie. My eighth guest was Rhonda Viteri. Rhonda Viteri has done 70.3 Ironman races, and she absolutely adores this world. But her fame is not in triathlon. Her fame, and she won't say that it's her fame, but she is one of the top 5 female technologists in the world. She is the CIO of Herbalife. She's been the CIO of other companies. She knows how to prove that technology is a way to move forward while not ruining personal relationships. Both of them combined is what Rhonda talks about. She also wrote a fantastic book, which I love the title, called Grit and Grind. That's what we got to do every day, isn't it? You got to grit your teeth. You got to grind at the stone, man. And you got to go out there and do it every day. And if you do, unbelievable things are going to happen. So thank you, Rhonda, for your insights, for your inspiration. Following Rhonda on Instagram and the other one, I don't know how she does everything she does in one day, but she gets it done. Rhonda Viteri. My 9th podcast was an emotional one for me to do. It was Mike Ergo. Mike Ergo, United States Marine, Ironman finisher. Mike Ergo went through the second Battle of Fallujah and lost over 20 of his comrades, falling all around him. Can you even imagine? Most of us can't. Most of us never will. And Mike's story is well chronicled, but I wanted to talk to him because when I saw him come through that finish line at Ironman Hawaii, when he carried the flag at Ironman Santa Rosa, he's giving back. He came home, terrible PTSD. This was a guy that put an M16 rifle, had his thumb on the trigger, and about ready to pull it, and made the decision not to. His life from then started moving in a direction that he didn't like. He made a change. He sought help. PTSD is not something you can cure on your own. There are support groups out there. So many military men and women and firefighters and policemen that I've talked to, they know that they may have something going on upstairs that they can't figure out. You can't figure it out on your own. But knowing that you're not working mentally correctly, you've got to find help. Mike Ergo found help. And the best part of this story is he went on vacation in Kona after he'd run some half Ironmans and stuff, just decided to go to the Big Island. Guess what weekend that was? It was Ironman Hawaii. And he found out what triathlon was all about. And he goes, I'm going to do this. Mike Ergo, you're an amazing story. I had the pleasure and during the pandemic back in 2020 to go up to Northern California and go deep sea fishing with him. He is a true warrior in life. Thank you, Michael. And then episode 10 was a suggestion from six-time Ironman world champion Mark Allen. Mark Allen, I mean, you can't say enough about this guy. I love him. Every time he talks, people listen. It's like that old commercial, if you've been around long enough, when the stock exchange company, E.F. Hutton, talks, everybody listens. That's the way it is with Mark, because you know there's going to be no bullshit coming out of his mouth. He's going to be one that's going to tell you how it is. He knows how to motivate and inspire. And Mark Allen had the idea when he listened to my Lionel Sanders podcast. He goes, Mike, we've got to talk about this. Lionel had so many gems in that podcast. So what Mark and I did, we went on Find Your Finish Line together, and we went through the Lionel podcast. And Mark brought out some incredible tidbits that we need to learn by and live by of what Lionel said. What I found inspiring about this, what I found so refreshing about this, here's a guy that could be standing on his laurels for the rest of his life. Six-time Ironman, won Nice like 20 times. The guy was unbeatable. And yet, when he wants that podcast with a young Lionel Sanders, he gained so much insight out of it that he wanted to talk about it. He wasn't above what Lionel said just because he's a big-time champion. So Mark is one that lives in the trenches still to try to learn and try to gain knowledge. And the podcast with him and I talking about the Lionel podcast is one I think you should see. The 11th podcast of the year was Ben O'Donnell. Ben O'Donnell, man, he goes on a business trip back in 2020. He comes home. He's got a little bit of a cold. His wife says, well, let me take you to the ER. Then I'll go pick up the kids at school. She didn't see him for 28 more days. He had COVID, one of the early cases out of Minnesota, out of the country. Well, he kept going downhill fast. They did what they did back then. They put him on the machines. They put him on a ventilator. They put him on the ECMO machine so they could oxygenate his blood so he could keep living. Doctors said there's no way this guy's going to survive, but he and his wife figured it out. She's a scientist. She believed the science and actually started directing doctors on, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? Well, he came out of it. He was the first one to come off that ECMO machine in North America living. Ben O'Donnell, an amazing story. Then he comes back and he does Ironman Tulsa last year. And it was incredible bringing him through the finish line. Ben O'Donnell, you got to check it out. My 12th podcast, Roderick Sewell. Roderick Sewell, the first above-the-knee bilateral amputee to finish Kona. As a young African-American man in America, it was just as him and his mom. His mother was such an influence. Even though he, didn't have any legs, she had him out doing everything. He is one of the most well-rounded humans you'd ever want to meet. And when he came through that finish line, and I had the opportunity to stand next to Mom and watch her tears flow down her face, bringing her son into that finish line in Kona, was remarkable. Roderick knows he's a role model. Roderick takes on that role tremendously. He does so much work for the Challenge Athletes Foundation as one of their ambassador athletes. His best friend and roommate, Rudy Garcia Tolson, as you know, Olympian, Paralympian, also an Ironman finisher. And he and Roderick have shown the world that anything is possible. Thank you, Roderick. my 13th podcast of the year. That was Kristen Mayer. Kristen Mayer, the Betty Squad. You've seen them out at races with their incredible looking kits that Kristen has designed and made. She has put together this Betty Squad after her line of clothing. The reason I wanted to have her on the podcast is she's one that truly juggles. She maintained her business during the pandemic, but it was stressful. It was hard. It almost broke her, but she didn't break. And she kept moving forward. And now it's selling like crazy. The Betty gear for everybody is out there. And Kristen Mayer is a true triathlete, an incredible athlete. And she's one to always tout that it's not because I'm a woman that I do this. It's because I'm a human that cares about everybody else. And I want to make sure everybody attains what they need to attain. Thank you, Kristen, for being on the show. My next podcast was Chris Nikic. Wow. November of 2020. The only Ironman I had done previous to that during that year was right before the pandemic, Ironman New Zealand in March of 2020. And then had the whole year of everything canceled, but somehow, some way, we got Ironman Florida in. And thank the gods that we did, because a young man by the name of Chris Nikic, the first ever person with Down syndrome to finish an Ironman, did it in Florida. Chris is a story for the ages. He has proved and knocked down barriers that most parents across the world would always build up around their child with Down syndrome. Nothing against that or how they thought, but now Chris and his father, Nick, are changing the way people perceive men and women with Down syndrome. Chris wrote a fantastic book called 1% Better. He lives by the adage of just getting 1% better every day. And that book is an inspiration to us all. Chris, you're an inspiration. Keep it up, buddy. And I can't wait to bring you across the finish line one day in Kona. My next guest, 15th guest, Lucy Charles Barclay from the UK. Wow, what can you say? 3-4-time finisher, second place in Kona. Always right on the edge. Always first out of the water, always pounding the bike, getting past on the run. But guess what? At Ironman 70.3 World Championship in St. George this past year, this young lady on the cover of Triathlete magazine came through that finish line as the world champion. And it was like this huge weight was lifted off to her shoulder. Now, what's on the slate for Lucy? Between you and me, I think she thinks nobody can beat her. And that may be true. Lucy is one of the most genuine, gregarious, loving triathletes there are out there. She loves training. She loves pushing herself to limits that she knows there's more out there, and she's going to go after them. And she loves talking to everybody. She loves being around everybody. When she came to that finish line in St. George and I had the opportunity to interview her, I almost started crying because she wasn't, but you could see what was pouring out of her. The years of putting in the struggle, the swimming, the Olympic caliber swimming athlete, wanting to be on the British Olympic team, and that didn't happen. And she just kept getting pushed back with unbelievable performances. But when she came through that finish line in St. George, there was no pushback. In May of this year, for the 2021 Ironman World Championship that'll be held in St. George, Utah, that is Lucy Charles's course. And I think she might be a tough one to beat. Thanks for being on, Lucy. My 16th guest. If you think of people in your life who are an inspiration to you, people in your life that you just can't believe they do what they do, someone you feel like is a true mentor, that's what this gentleman is to me, and even my son Andy, Joe DeSena. Joe DeSena is the president and CEO of the Spartan Events. He is a former Ironman athlete, former Wall Street tycoon, made a lot of money there on his own. He cleaned pools for the mafia in New Jersey and New York as a teenager, a high schooler, and college kid. And he built an empire with the Spartan race. He wanted to show people that, you know what, you've got to get uncomfortable every day. And Joe DeCina practices what he preaches. He's an amazing family man. Being around him, I've been at the Boston office of Spartan, and being in that office, he's infectious in there. Everybody works to the best that they can work. They play hard, they work hard. And he just came out with a book called Mental Toughness for Family, 10 Rules for Resilience by Joe DeCina. Every parent in the world should read this book. I wish I had it when I was raising the kids. Some of the things that is in this book that we did, my wife Rose and I, were glad to do, and some things we didn't. But now you have the opportunity to pick this book up. Joe speaks it like it is. Some of it is tough to listen to. Hard things are tough to listen to. But if you go through the whole thing and know that he practices what he preaches, and some people may say, well, he's a little bit crazy. Well, a little bit crazy is a good thing, especially in today's world. So get crazy out there. Thanks, Joe. My next guest she is a Ironman ambassador with the Ironman Foundation, as I am. So we're always together at functions and things like that. Shannon Spake. Shannon Spake is well known as a NASCAR reporter, TV, Fox News, NFL sideline reporter, 70.3 Ironman. She was going to do Kona last year. Obviously, that didn't happen. And the reason I wanted to have Shannon on the show is she's another one, a mom that juggles an amazing career, a career that takes so much preparation. You just can't go out there, get on the camera, and start talking. She's one that's raising twin boys, has a great relationship with her husband. They are always doing things with their local community. And she is an ambassador for the Ironman Foundation, as I mentioned, and is raising money constantly. How she juggles it all, I don't know. But Shannon, thank you very much for being on the podcast. You are an inspiration. My next one, I got to bring him through the finish line at Ironman Florida this year. The Peace brothers, Kyle and Brent Peace. They did Kona a few years back, and they are the epitome of what brothers should be to one another. I have never seen so much love and adoration among two brothers, and I love my brothers dearly. But these two go to the highest peaks of it because they have to depend on one another to do what they do. Kyle is in the chair, cerebral palsy, but he is as much an athlete as every one of us are out there. The way he can push his brother Brent, push his buttons, let him know he's there for him. And the Kyle Peace Foundation is raising money for athletes like themselves all across the world to be able to achieve things and find their finish line. So Kyle and Brent, keep doing what you're doing, guys. I love being around you, and it was an honor bringing you across that finish line again at Ironman Florida. My 19th podcast was Jill Koski. Jill Koski was a story in my book, and I was vacillating for some time about having her on as a podcast guest, not because I don't love her or like her or anything like that. It's just that I didn't know if I wanted to repeat some of the stories in my book on the podcast, but I felt I should with Jill. Mental illness is not something that is talked about like cancer or any other type of disease that's out there in the public. Mental illness is the hidden disease. Well, Jill Koski experienced it to the height of it. Bipolar. Was an amazing psychologist, had a couple of degrees, a master's degree, but found herself going down into a hole that she didn't know how she was going to get out. And I mean, she went deep into that hole with 6 or 7 DUIs, ended up incarcerated. We're talking in prison for 8 years, and then got out and is now turning her life around. And she got out and did Ironman Wisconsin. And you've got to listen to the podcast, especially around this time of year. We just came out of the holidays, a stressful time. We're going into the new year. Some of us go, New Year's resolution, I'm still trying to figure out what's happening tomorrow. We understand that. Listen to Jill's podcast. And as I said before, with Mike Ergo, seek help if you need it. Some of the toughest things to do in life is to ask for help. And Jill shows you that when she asks for help, she's working on it every day of getting better. I finished off 2021, Find Your Finish Line, with a guest that I wanted to end on such a big positive note. Not like the other shows weren't positive, but only because of her attitude, her demeanor, her outlook on life. Heather Jackson, professional triathlete. She is amazing. And when you watch the podcast and see her smile and listen to her words and know that the bubbly personality is real. She approaches everything. I don't know how she can be so humble and so sweet and yet be a badass on the race course, wanting to win in the worst way. She combines those two worlds better than anybody I know. Heather Jackson, her and her husband Waddy, obviously, and all know about Waddy Inc. and the clothing. That now is by the wayside, and they've got a new team called Team Plush, which you'll be hearing a lot about. So having Heather Jackson on as the final guest of 2021, and that show just aired a few weeks ago. You can check that out. That's one you want to see. And I think you, like me, are going to wish her nothing but fantastic finishes all this season of 2022. Thanks, Heather. Thank you again for all my guests for being on. Remember, everybody, your actions define you. They define you each and every day. And the biggest part about your actions is people are watching you. Your kids, your next door neighbor, your moms, your dads, your nieces. People are watching you. And what you do influences others. Even though you're having a bad day, why do you want everybody else around you to have a bad day? Keep your thoughts as positive as you can. Sure, we're all going to have a tough day, a struggle. But know that struggle also is going to be somebody else's struggle. So keep yourself strong. Isn't it pretty incredible how during the last 2 years, adversity kind of introduced yourself to you? Adversity is something that we don't like. We don't want it to come our way. But it will make you stronger. It'll let you know who you really are on the inside. And that's what this whole pandemic has done. I think the adversity that we've all experienced is a good thing because we're going to come out stronger. We're going to beat it and come out stronger. Another thing I saw through the year was, use things, not people. Love people, not things. It's amazing how, oh my gosh, I see somebody got a new bike and it's made their day, or knew this or knew that. Those are fantastic things. We all want them. Remember, you don't love those things. They're things you want in your life. So love the people around you more than you love the things in your life. I will be announcing my schedule for 2022, probably in, 3-4 weeks. We're still trying to work all that out. So I'll let you know. I'll get online and let you know with that. And, be kind to people around there. Don't wait for kindness. Create it. You be the one. Why not? You create it. We did lose a fellow triathlete this year that, if you ever did Ironman Wisconsin, he did like 23 Ironmans, but Ironman Wisconsin is where he went to all the time. Frank Farrar from South Dakota, the former governor of South Dakota. They had his funeral in the Rotunda in Pierre, South Dakota, the state's capital. They sent me a video of that, a glorious affair. Frank Farrar was one that was told that he was going to die in a few months of cancer. Well, guess what? That didn't happen, and he went on to do tons of Ironmans, flew his own plane that he owned to races all over his part of the country. Frank was an inspiration to us all, but he didn't believe that. But when I'd bring him on stage at Ironman Wisconsin to talk to him, he spoke in such the simplest terms. Frank, why do you do Ironman? Why do you do triathlon? And his simple answers were, because I can do it. I want to finish because I love it. I mean, that's what he was all about. So Frank, rest in peace to Frank's family. And Mary Turner, his daughter's a couple-time Ironman finisher. So my condolences to the whole family, but he lived the life that he wanted to live, Frank Farrar. Well, I think I'm just about talked out on this final podcast. Well, it's not the final. It's the first one of 2022, but it's a recap of 2021. I, again, thank each and every one of you and Curad and Activize for being a part of it. Boulder Communications and Andy Riley for producing it. We've got 20 more on the slate for this year. I'm going through guests now of who to call and who to bring on and all that good stuff. Some of you are sending me suggestions. Thank you for that. You can do that at MikeRiley.net. And you can always send me a message there. And also remember that if you want a book signed by me, you can, pick one up at Amazon or wherever and send me a message on my website, and I'll tell you where to send it, and I'll sign it and send it back to you. So thanks again, everybody, for being who you are. And remember, the biggest inspiration in your life, the biggest motivator is you. You got to start with you, boys and girls. You have to start with you. You be the one to start moving you of getting out of bed in the morning, making the bed, and moving through the day as the champion you are. If you're a future Ironman athlete, can't wait to see you at the finish line. If you've finished one Ironman or tons of them, if you've done any triathlon or 5K or marathon, you are a champion for getting to that start line. Hope to see you at the start lines in 2022, everybody. And as always, my warmest aloha.